The doctor looked at the X-ray film for the third time. Then he turned to the old man and asked, "Where did these shrapnel pieces come from?" The old man smiled quietly. "Which war are you referring to, Doc?" The doctor's clipboard hit the floor. "Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of honor, silence, and forgotten heroism, please tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today, and if you believe stories like this need to be remembered. Hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they never fade away." It was 6:30 a.m. and the corridors of St. Mary's General Hospital in Chicago hadn't fully awakened yet. Fluorescent lights flickered on and off, and the night cleaning crew was wiping away the last traces of their shift. At that hour, hospital corridors were at their quietest. The emergency room chaos hadn't started yet. The daily patient flow hadn't begun. Frank Martinez sat in one of the plastic chairs, hands clasped together, waiting. He was 73 years old, but his posture was still straight, his shoulders still broad. He wore a clean but worn button-down shirt, buttoned all the way to the top. His pants were pressed, his shoes polished. Some habits never change. The red light was on above the operating room door. Inside, his 8-year-old grandson, Tommy, was having his appendix removed. It was a simple operation, according to the doctors. But for Frank Martinez, the world had stopped. His daughter's only child. The boy's father had died in a car accident 2 years ago, and his mother had lost her battle with cancer last year. Now this child was all they had left. Frank's hands trembled slightly, but not from age. This came from memories that would never fade. Every hospital smell, every antiseptic odor, took him back 50 years, to the field hospital in Vietnam, to those days when he carried wounded soldiers under fire. But nobody knew any of this. Nobody knew who Frank Martinez really was. The young nurse at the station saw him only as the grandson's grandfather. The doctors passing by in the corridor noticed only an elderly man. Even the security guard just smiled and walked past. Frank Martinez preferred it that way. He had learned long ago to be invisible, to not draw attention, to quietly do his duty. At 7:45 a.m., the operating room door opened. Dr. Michael Thompson emerged, washing his hands and removing his mask. A young surgeon, only 35 years old, but his hands were steady. Frank stood up but didn't rush. He approached patiently. "How did the operation go, Doc?" he asked, his voice calm but anxious. Dr. Thompson smiled. "It went very well. Tommy's a strong kid. We got the appendix before it ruptured. No complications at all. In a few hours, when he wakes up, he'll want to see you." A 50-pound weight lifted from Frank's shoulders. Moisture gathered at the corners of his eyes. "Thank you, Doc. Thank you so much." "Don't mention it," the doctor said. "By the way, there are some missing details on the registration form. We need to put you down as emergency contact. What's your full name?" "Frank Martinez." "Your profession?" "Retired." The doctor was taking notes with pen and paper. "Retired from what field?" Frank paused for a moment. "Pilot." 2 days later, they came back to the hospital for Tommy's follow-up exam. The child was cheerful, walking, laughing. The stitches were healing well. But Dr. Thompson wanted one more X-ray for control. "Just to be sure," he told Frank. "Standard post-operative procedure." The X-ray technician was preparing Tommy while Frank waited. Then the technician made a mistake. He accidentally entered Frank's information into the system. "Sorry, Mr. Martinez. Were you supposed to get an X-ray too?" "No, just my grandson," Frank said. But the technician had already pressed the button. "Never mind, it's already taken. Won't hurt anything." 30 minutes later, Dr. Thompson was reviewing the X-ray results. Tommy's films were perfect, but the other X-ray that was taken by mistake. This was something entirely different. Dr. Thompson had been working as a surgeon for 15 years. He had seen hundreds of X-rays, but what he was looking at on the screen now was something rarely seen, even in medical textbooks. 3 metal pieces in the chest cavity, 1 very close to the heart, missing the trachea by millimeters, 2 more in the back spine, an old fracture mark in the left shoulder joint, professional surgical scar tissue, and in the right arm a small metal piece embedded in the bone. These were shrapnel marks, war wounds. Dr. Thompson took the X-ray film and walked toward the room where Frank was waiting. But there was a change in his steps. He was no longer going just as a doctor, but as a curious human being. He knocked on the door and entered. Frank was waiting with Tommy. The child was playing with toys. "Mr. Martinez," the doctor said, respect evident in his voice. "Could I talk with you for a moment?" "Of course, Doc. Is there a problem with Tommy?" "No, Tommy's perfect. This is about something else." Dr. Thompson hung the X-ray film on the light panel. Frank's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw the film. After 50 years, his old wounds had come back to light. Dr. Thompson looked at the X-ray film for the 3rd time. Then he turned to the old man and asked, "Where did these shrapnel pieces come from?" Frank smiled quietly. "Which war are you referring to, Doc?" The doctor's clipboard hit the floor. There was a second of silence. Dr. Thompson picked up the clipboard from the floor, but his eyes were still on the X-ray film. "Mr. Martinez," the doctor began, his voice almost a whisper. "I'm a surgeon. I've been doing this for 15 years. Shrapnel wounds like this only occur in war zones. And the position of these pieces... How did you survive?" Frank stood up. Tommy was still playing with toys, not understanding what was being discussed. Frank gestured to the doctor. "Let's talk outside." In the corridor, while Dr. Thompson waited, Frank sighed. "Doc, I don't like to discuss these topics." "Please," the doctor said. "I'm just curious. From a medical standpoint, seeing someone who survived wounds like this, it's very rare." After a long silence, Frank began to speak. "In 1971, I was a pilot in Vietnam. I flew an F-4 Phantom. One day, we engaged enemy aircraft in North Vietnamese airspace. The doctor held his breath. My plane was hit. I ejected with a parachute, but I landed in the jungle, in enemy territory. Help was very far away. When the rescue team found me 3 days later..." Frank paused. "These shrapnel pieces are from back then. How did you survive 3 days?" "In pilot training, you take survival courses. But in that moment, it's real war. Either you live or you die." There was a very old weight in Frank's eyes. "I was hit twice, in the leg, in the shoulder, but I held on because I had to get home." Dr. Thompson was shocked. Standing in front of him wasn't just a grandfather, but a living piece of history. "Don't you ever talk about it to anyone?" "What would I talk about?" Frank shrugged. "I did my duty. I came home. I started a family. Now I take care of my grandson. Let the past stay in the past." But Dr. Thompson wasn't going to let it go. That evening at home, Dr. Thompson started researching online. He searched for Vietnam War American pilots. There was a lot of information. Then he narrowed it down. 4 Phantom pilots, Vietnam, 1971. He found declassified military records. Operation Rolling Thunder. Air rescue missions. And then, in a buried military archive, he found a name, Captain Frank Martinez, 1971, Vietnam Search and Rescue Operations. There weren't many details, but there was a photo. Black and white, blurry, but the face was recognizable. Younger then, but definitely the same person. The next day at the hospital, Thompson called Frank. "Mr. Martinez, I'd like to see you." "Is there a problem, Doc?" "No, I just want to talk with you." When Frank came to the hospital, the doctor took him to his private office. His computer was open on the desk, showing old military records on the screen. "Mr. Martinez," the doctor said, "I did some research." Frank's face changed. He was no longer calm, but careful and cautious. "You weren't just a pilot in Vietnam. You also served in search and rescue operations, downed pilot rescue missions." Frank remained silent. "The records show that you participated in 3 rescue operations. You saved 7 pilots." "Doc," Frank's voice was now stern, "let's not discuss these topics." "Why?" "This isn't something to be ashamed of. This is heroism." "Heroism?" Frank laughed with a bitter smile. "Doc, there's no heroism in war. There are only people trying to survive." "But you risked your life so others could live." "Because it was my duty. They were someone else's children, fathers, brothers. I was also someone's child." Dr. Thompson understood. The man in front of him didn't want to be praised, he just wanted to be forgotten. "Mr. Martinez, if you'd allow it, I'd like to record the story. For history." "No." "Why?" "Because some stories are more beautiful in silence, Doc. I lived, I came home, I had a family. That's enough." But this incident started spreading around the hospital. Dr. Thompson hadn't mentioned the X-ray mix-up, but he had made it clear that Frank Martinez was someone special. The nurses started to notice. The security guards began treating him with more respect. A week later, when Tommy came for his final checkup, there was a small change in the hospital corridor. Chief of Medicine Dr. Sarah Williams had come out to greet Frank. "Mr. Martinez," the chief said, "it's an honor to meet you." Frank was surprised. "What honor, ma'am?" "Dr. Thompson told us about you. Of course, he didn't give details, but hosting a hero is an honor for us." "I'm not a hero or anything. I'm just a grandfather bringing his grandson to the hospital." But the chief insisted. "Mr. Martinez, we have a special program for veterans at this hospital. We can accommodate your needs." "I don't want special treatment." "This isn't special treatment, it's respect." At that moment, the patient families waiting in the corridor had overheard the conversation. An elderly woman approached. "Are you a war veteran?" Frank nodded. The woman bowed and kissed his hand. "Thank you. My father was also a soldier. He died in Korea." Suddenly, a quiet crowd had formed in the corridor. People were approaching, thanking him, showing their respect. Frank didn't like this, but he couldn't refuse it either. When Tommy's checkup was finished, Dr. Thompson spoke with Frank one last time. "Mr. Martinez, I have one more question." "Go ahead, Doc." "Have you ever thought about having those shrapnel pieces removed?" "Technology has advanced. They can be safely removed now." Frank thought about it. "No, Doc. They're part of me now. I've been carrying them for 50 years. They remind me of who I am." "What do they remind you of?" "That I lived, and why I lived." Dr. Thompson understood. Those metal pieces weren't just shrapnel. They were documents of a life lived, a war fought, a sacrifice made. "Mr. Martinez, I have one last request." "What is it?" "When your grandson grows up, will you tell him? Will you tell him these stories?" Frank looked at Tommy. The child was playing happily with toys, unaware of what he had experienced. "Doc," Frank said, "some stories aren't told. They're lived. When Tommy grows up, I'll teach him how to live. I'll teach him to be brave, to do what's right, to sacrifice for others. I'll teach him values, not stories. That's also a way of education. The best way of education." As they left the hospital that day, Frank was holding Tommy's hand. The child was talking cheerfully, jumping with the happiness that recovery brings. "Grandpa," Tommy said, "why was the doctor so interested in your X-ray?" Frank stopped, knelt down, and looked at his grandson. "Because, Tommy, sometimes memories are stored in a person's body. Good memories, bad memories. But they're all things that make us who we are. Are you sick too, Grandpa?" "No, son. I'm just old. And being old is a beautiful thing, because an old person has learned a lot, experienced a lot." Tommy was satisfied with this answer. They continued walking. At the hospital, Dr. Thompson was watching them from his window, an old man and his grandson, walking hand in hand out of the hospital. But now that old man was different to him. Not just a patient's relative, but a living piece of history. That night, Dr. Thompson was having dinner with his own children when he thought, how many Frank Martinezes were there on the street? How many quiet heroes, ordinary-looking people with extraordinary pasts, were there among us? And perhaps the most beautiful thing was that they weren't showing off. Frank Martinez's silence was his greatest strength, because real heroes don't feel the need to prove themselves. They just live. And they set an example with their lives. Some people become famous by telling their stories. Others become great by keeping their stories. Frank Martinez was from the second group. The silence he had carried for 50 years had accidentally come to light one day. But even then, he hadn't seen it as an opportunity. It was just a passing moment for him. That's how real heroes are. They don't become prisoners of their past. They become the hope of the future. Frank Martinez's war wounds had stayed in the past, but his love and sacrifice were passing to his grandson. This was perhaps the most beautiful victory. Now I ask you, have you ever met someone like this? Someone who lives quietly, hides the heroism in their past, but sets an example with their present life. Write their names in the comments. Tell their stories. Because at the Human Stories, we believe that these quiet heroes should never be invisible. If this story touched you, subscribe and share, because the stories of people like Frank Martinez should be remembered not just in hospital corridors, but by everyone. See you in the next video. And remember, if there's a hero living quietly around you, try to notice them, because sometimes the greatest stories are hidden in the quietest people.